Sidney Powell's latest filing in the case involving Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. I cannot wait to just hit these 3 points with you. So where we are on this, Sidney Powell, now attorney for Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, has already pled guilty. So she filed a motion to compel Brady evidence. Brady is just the standard in federal law, actually comes from a case named Brady. Basically says when you are prosecuting and you have someone, you filed charges, someone is being prosecuted, the duty of the prosecutor, you must turn over all potentially exculpatory evidence, meaning anything you have that would help the defense either defend itself or even call into question a witness the prosecution is bringing. Anything that would help the defense, you have to turn it over. So the prosecutors in the case involving Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, what they did to him was they continued investigating and talking, and at first he didn't even realize they weren't on his side. He thought this is the Trump administration, this is the Trump FBI, they're my team, these are my guys. They got Flynn into the position where he's very, very worried about what they're going to do, but they hadn't charged him yet. So up until the time they charge him, they don't have a duty under Brady. They pretty much charged him, worked out a plea deal, and got him to plead guilty within about a day. So then once he's pled guilty, there's no pending prosecution, and they still have no Brady obligation. You have to understand what they did. They set up this man to not be able to defend himself, to waive their own responsibility to produce Brady evidence. This is what is now the issue that Sidney Powell, the brilliant, is, and she is if I ever get arrested, heaven forbid, I'm going to hire her, whatever she charges. But she filed a motion. I had to hit 3 points she made because it's really important to understand. She is not just exposing the wrongdoing done to Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. She's exposing the wrongdoing, the entire mindset inside the FBI that we are going to get Trump. We don't care what it costs. We don't care what it takes. We're going to get him. So let me just tell you these interesting things. This is what she put in her pleading. The government sought and received permission. This is a legalistic thing, a surreply, by complaining. So the government, the FBI is now, or the DOJ is complaining that Sidney Powell, in her motion to compel production of Brady evidence, so she's trying to get the judge to order the government to produce the Brady evidence. She says the government essentially they claim that the defendant, Flynn and Powell, bootlegged new arguments into his reply. But then, the government's complaining about this, but she said, but they didn't say in what they wrote, what is it that wasn't done? And she says the government's surreply is new only in its stunning admissions and untenable paradoxes. According to the government, it had no obligation to produce its superfluity, which is abundance, of Brady evidence before Mr. Flynn pleaded guilty because he wasn't a defendant until he was formally charged. And it had no obligation to produce its cache after he pleaded guilty, the same or the next day. Well, because his guilty plea erased its obligation. They're basically saying they short-circuited his ability to ever have access to Brady evidence. Second point she's making. So the 302s, you've been talking about these. It's the form the FBI interviews somebody. They go back, they write up the 302s. Evidence now exists, not speculation, evidence that inside the FBI, the people changed Flynn's 302s. Comey and others inside the FBI had said, yeah, we talked to Michael Flynn. We don't think he was lying. Everything seemed fine. Didn't think he was lying. And so the 302s were altered, apparently, by Lisa Page and Peter Strzok. So her point on this is, so she's trying to demand, so you have to get this and see how nefarious the government's conduct is. Sidney Powell is saying, I want to see all of the versions of the 302s about Flynn that got before you got to the one that we now have in front of us. I want to see all the versions. And the government's answer was something like, well, I don't have it with me today. Like that was literally like he's saying, I don't seem to have that in my pocket. So she, fortunately for us, understands the system of the FBI. So she says, again, Sidney Powell, the government attempts to gloss over the existence of at least one earlier draft of the Flynn 302, then asks the court to leap blindly to the conclusion But if it did exist, it contained the same information as the government had already deigned to produce. Aside from the inherent contradiction, so she's saying, if the government's trying to say the first 302 are the same as the one you produced, then there wasn't any change. It wouldn't be a first one. And then she says the FBI Sentinel system, and she's capitalizing Sentinel. It's a computer program. Sentinel system can retrieve any draft. Drafts are numerically serialized when placed in the system. She knows the system. She's saying you can't just say I don't have the old 302s. She's really hammering them on producing these things. And she dropped something else. This is going to make them nuts, which is Flynn's lawyers at the time of this FBI arm twisting. You can't even call it a questioning, arm twisting. His lawyers at Covington had helped him prepare his FARA, F-A-R-A, Foreign Agent Registration Act. They helped him produce and fill out the FARA. He was then being questioned about the accuracy of what he put in his FARA. So the Covington lawyers who helped him do that form, fill out the form correctly, they're in conflict. They're trying to protect, they're supposed to represent their client's interests, but he's being accused of putting false things about his FARA, which if he did, the lawyers are responsible because they helped him fill it out. So they're trying to push, they're in this meeting with the DOJ and Flynn, trying to push Flynn, maybe you better take this deal, because they want the government to drop the accusation about FARA because they themselves may have liability. She point that little gem out. Last gem, this is her closing point. Her closing point, I read the whole brief. It's a wonderful brief, but you might find it boring. I found it fun. I'm going to tell you the last point she makes. In conclusion, this is her filing. Love Sidney Powell. In conclusion, yes, the government engaged in conduct so shocking to the conscience and so inimical to our system of justice that it requires the dismissal of the charges for outrageous government conduct. She gives a citation to a Supreme Court ruling. However, as fully briefed in our motion to compel and reply, at this time, Mr. Flynn only requests an order compelling the government to produce the additional Brady evidence he has requested in full and unredacted form, and an order to show cause, which is a motion you can file, an order to show cause. She wants the court to issue an order to show cause why the government should not be held in contempt. At the appropriate time, Mr. Flynn will file a separate motion asking that the court dismiss the prosecution for egregious government misconduct and in the interest of justice. One last piece she had in there was pointing out that at the time they arm twisted Flynn into pleading guilty, they were threatening Lieutenant General Michael Flynn's adult son, who had a wife and a baby at home, threatening that they could charge him with crimes also. Flynn is thinking, keeping my adult son out of prison? Okay, fine, I'll plead to something. This has been brilliantly lawyered. It's not over yet, but brilliantly lawyered by Sidney Powell, and in a way that actually is not just, as I said, not just defending Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. It is really exposing for the American public, if you're willing to pay attention and learn it, to recognize the degree to which the FBI, DOJ, CIA, and Brennan, and others were so determined to get President Trump, all standards tossed to the wind, all legal protocol dropped in order to get President Trump. Because to get Flynn, they figured Flynn will flip, he will go help us get Trump, and this was their mission. People, if this does not get cleaned out, if we do not have a massive clean out of the FBI, DOJ, arrests, prosecution, and jail time for at least a dozen people I could name, then we're deciding that we will abandon the rule of law in America, and that is not okay.